Welcome to Conflict Managed. I'm your host, Mary Brown. Conflict Managed is a weekly podcast about toxic work environments and how to fix them. We're glad you're here. Good morning, Michelle, and welcome to Conflict Managed.
Thank you. It's so nice to meet you, Mary.
It's so lovely to meet you. I love what you're up to with helping people have better use of their time and reclaim their joy and all that you're doing. But before we get to what you're up to right now, I would like to hear about the first job you ever had as a young person.
Ooh, first job I ever had. Wow. Okay. You mean full-time job or little jobs?
Little job.
Okay. I was a babysitter at 12 years old. Of course, today we can't do that, right? Because we're afraid that 12-year-olds can't handle these things. But I started babysitting at 12 and I babysat all through high school and, had a clientele and all that. I learned at a very young age to price myself out of reach for people whose kids I couldn't stand. There was a family across the street who had three children, and they were violent and horrible to deal with, and it was absolutely impossible. I hit a point where I said, when the 6-year-old threw a truck and almost hit the baby in the head, and I couldn't get him to stop, was the point where in 19, I don't know, 78, I told them that I wanted $5 an hour, which was like I made $1 an hour with everybody else. And the sad part was they still wanted to hire me because they couldn't get anybody else.
Mm. Oh,
Talk about conflict, right? At a very
yeah.
young age.
Yeah, yeah. That is so interesting. One of the first places, of course, we learn about conflict is our family of origin, and but then you going into other families and seeing
Right.
their family dynamic, not only with the children, but then also how you're interacting with the parents. Um, did you, how did you learn to speak up for yourself, or was it just I can't take it anymore, or did you get your family or somebody else help you along to say this is how you deal with this?
No, nobody helped me. I spoke to the parents after that incident and I told them what had happened and said, I'm really concerned about this. I don't know how to handle it. And the dad he made the kind of comment, it was sort of like boys will be boys.
Mhm.
And I wasn't comfortable with that. All I could think was that I was going to end up taking an infant to the hospital
Yeah.
if that happened again. I mean, thank God the truck didn't hit the baby, but it
Hmm.
could have.
Hmm.
And I surely didn't want to be the person responsible. I was about 14 at the time. I was smart enough to know I didn't want to be there and be in charge when something like that happened.
Hmm.
And, they called again and I asked for way more money. And then I said I was busy. And then I never accepted a job from them again. I never told them I'm not willing to accept a job from you because of the danger of being in your house with your children. But that was really what was going on.
Hmm. It is interesting. A lot of the people that I interact with are conflict averse and they
Hmm.
don't know how to speak up for themselves. And so they sit in really terrible circumstances for themselves. And it is
Right.
interesting the thing about youth. Sometimes we just know intuitively and we say, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
There's this it's interesting. And then sometimes that just kind of ekes out of people as they are more all these other sorts of pressures of course paying mortgage and insurance and all that kind of
Of
stuff.
course. And there's also the pressure now that I'm thinking about this incident, and it's been years since it happened, obviously. I think I did mention it to my mom at the time, and her reaction was, I'm so surprised by that. They're such nice people. And I think that kind of thing happens too, right? Because my mom didn't see what was going on inside these people's house.
Yeah.
She saw the people and how they behaved among adults, and they were nice.
Yeah.
But, that's not always the bigger picture of everything that's going on. And of course you can say that about a workplace or anything else,
Yeah.
is you don't know what's going on inside of it until you're part of being inside of it.
Yeah, that really made me think about this whole idea of believing people, right?
Yeah.
Because I think my experience of somebody or situation is what other people are experiencing. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's a kind of gaslighting that can happen when I say, oh, but he or she is so nice. I haven't had that experience.
Right.
And instead of, I mean, that might be a natural, we do have a base from where we start, but to set that back and say, yeah, but I'm not talking about me. And I'm not
Right.
talking about my experience. This person is telling me something. How about I get curious about them and what they've experienced and
Sure.
how they might need assistance or what they see?
And everybody has their own perspective.
Yeah,
Always, everybody has their own perspective. Every story is 10 different stories.
yeah,
And that's
yeah.
so important.
I love that. Every story is 10 different stories. So, you went through high school, you went to college. What did you major in?
I majored in economics and Spanish. So I had a dual degree, and so that was fun.
Why those two?
I loved Spanish, and the economics was because I was in an honors business program at a liberal arts college where we didn't offer a business major. So to get what was the equivalent of a business major, I was in an honors program that required me to be an economics major.
Hmm.
And I actually made the decision to step out of that program before I finished the mandatory internship. I didn't do the internship, and I decided to go to Spain instead. And I wanted to go abroad. I loved my Spanish classes, and it was always my fun outlet. And I had a professor who advised me that the options weren't really great for me at the time. I mean, this is a terrible thing. I was very overweight my junior and senior year in high school, or in college, I mean. And I hate to say it, hiring people don't always give the very big girl the best opportunities. And I had been offered a position which I was planning on going for, which was controlled by the director of my program. He was the one who was choosing who took that position, and that was where I was supposed to go. And at the end of, we had a homecoming weekend or a alumni weekend or some big event weekend involving alumni. And the gentleman who owned the company that I was supposed to work for went to a mixer at his fraternity house, and there was a guy who was part of my program who was on academic probation for the program and was not supposed to be going on an internship that semester. And he had a conversation with that gentleman who went to the director and said, I want him.
Hmm.
And so I got a call the following Monday. I need to sit down and talk to you, Michelle. And I go into this man's office and he tells me that the internship I was counting on, and I had stopped applying for other ones, was no longer available because he'd given it to a big donor alum's request. And at that point, the only option available to me was we talked a little before this about number crunching and how it's totally not me. The option I had left was a marketing internship that would have been statistical analysis. It was all number crunching.
Hmm.
And it was in an area of the country that I really didn't want to go to. And I was like, great, what do I do? Do I take this 8-month internship in a job I don't want? And it would have been, prestigious and paid and all that, but something I had no interest in. And I went to my academic advisor and he said, listen, like you love Spanish. You've been, you get A's in all your Spanish classes. You're getting like B's and C's in your accounting classes because you hate that. He's like, don't take an internship you don't like just because that's the track that the
Hmm.
system that you're part of is telling you have to do. And he's like, you don't have to stay in that program. 5 years from now, nobody's going to care that you graduated with this program on your degree.
Hmm.
And, but if you go to Spain and you develop your Spanish language skills and you have a great time and you have a great experience that fuels you, you're going to have so much better come out of that. And so I dropped out of the program and went to Barcelona. And,
Oh.
it was the best decision. It was great. I loved it there. I now live in Miami. I am fully bilingual. I deal with people in Spanish literally every day, and it's part of who I am. I mean, I can't even imagine not having that be part of me.
What an absolute gift for that
Yeah,
mentor to speak into your life. And I think so many times as a young person, you think, I've got to do this on this time frame. And this is so important because you're told when you enter the program and this is going to be, how they sell it and that's just fine. But then we
right.
then we can get trapped if we don't have somebody else say, hey, I love that. In 5 years, no one's going to see that. with this program that you graduated.
Or that you
Um,
were an economics major. I mean, I ended up not doing anything relevant to economics. I ultimately went to law school and I was a lawyer for 33 years. And my liberal arts degree helped me a lot because it taught me to
mhm,
learn and it taught me to really not be afraid of anything that I needed to wrap my head around. So I could learn medical science, I could learn neuropsychology, I could learn how to deal with a technical expert of whatever kind by learning, by researching and by talking to people and really getting my head around it.
mhm.
If I had just been like this, like I'm a business major and this is all I know, I don't think I would have been successful in the way that I was in my legal career. And I surely wouldn't have pivoted at 59 into a completely different kind of career, which I'm loving and which is helping people avoid and get out of burnout.
Wow. Yeah, I also just want to give a quick note to fat phobia that is and the discrimination that people
Yeah,
face because of how they look. They say I can't remember. I've seen this several times, but if a woman has a choice between pursuing like her MBA or losing 20 pounds, she will make more money if she loses the weight, which is just, I mean, so
it's,
absolutely ridiculous. Um, so just a
it
note, all
is,
of
it
us
is,
listeners, we need to change that. That is
it is.
utterly
And
ridiculous.
my first job after college, I ended up being a headhunter in the tech industry.
Mm,
And in that role of being a headhunter, I read a lot of articles about hiring and about people's qualifications and psychology and all kinds of stuff. And one of the things I read had statistics about overweight women. And the statistic that I thought was really interesting, it had to do with sales jobs. Overweight women, according to this study, were much more likely to be very successful in sales than men.
mm,
And the reasoning behind it, I thought was horrific. The reasoning behind it was that overweight women have to essentially be more personable and work harder at connecting just to be able to have a normal social life and feel accepted, which is to me just awful. And I
yeah.
did live that for a while, so I know about it. The other part of it was that, and this was in the early 80s, so, but I don't think things have changed that much, if at all. Men in control of hiring, men in control of purchasing, etc., were less likely to take an attractive woman seriously
Mm,
in the context of she's here to talk to me about buying a tractor or whatever, right? Like some big piece of equipment or some kind of whatever it is she's selling in her job, that the overweight woman was not treated like an object in the same way. And the men who were in charge of the purchasing were more likely to listen to them in a business way as opposed to imagining what they might look like under their suit, which to me, that was just gross, right?
yeah.
But
So the information is you can't win.
I
You're either
know,
too
right?
attractive
So,
or not attractive enough.
right.
Wow.
I mean, it's like, what do we do, right? Maybe what we do is we overthrow the current situation and we say bye-bye to patrimony. And or patriarchy, and we allow our, people to express themselves as who they are and be
Yeah,
who they are.
right. Yes. Egalitarianism all the way. We need, I'm a huge believer in all different kinds of diversity because then we don't just have one type of hiring, one way of thinking, and in all industries, right? So the
Yes,
more we have a real reflection of the culture and people around us, the less that way of being, hiring, preferencing, is going to less likely be dominant.
exactly. We want to make sure that the people who are in a team or in an organization are reflective of the customers, are reflective of the community around them, are able to, and this is part of what I talk about when I talk about the art of bending time in a really kind of ninja move. You want people whose reach out into the society, whether it's locally, nationally, internationally, those people's reach is going to expand the reach of your organization. You don't want to shut down who they are. You want to expand who they are.
Right.
And you want to have all of those people being part of a system that makes you bigger and better.
I love what you just said. So much when I think about diversity is we want to bring everybody there, and um, but this idea of not just having them there, but expanding who they are, right? So not just
Yeah.
okay, we'll take your differences and let you have them. More, we want more of it. We want more of who
Right.
you are. That's
If you're
lovely.
the, if I'll use an example. If you're the involved in your church Christian person in the crowd and your organization doesn't really have a good reach into that community, well, guess what? Now you have somebody. You shouldn't just be telling that person, okay, we're going to tolerate you for being how you are or who you are. We're going to embrace who you are. And we want you to bring the best of who you are to our table along with all your friends, right? We want you to bring yourself, whether it's you come from a whatever background, you're an immigrant, you're a person of color, you're a woman, you come from the north or the south or the, whatever it is, all of us have our things
Mhm.
that make us great. And if we acknowledge that and we embrace that and we capitalize on it, then we're going to be better as an entity.
Absolutely. So, Michelle, tell us why law school? How did you get to law school? And then what kind of law did you specialize in?
Okay. How I got to law school, I would tell anybody, don't do it. Um,
My son's in
Believe
law
it or
school right
not, I
now.
mean, this is just, I think about it, what a say. I mean, I came from a background of people who were very traditional in thinking that you should have certain kinds of jobs, working in a big company or a profession, and that's what's safe. And there was a lot of safety in my family about being, not taking risks. So I'd already taken risks in that I had moved across the country by myself. I got a job in a field that nobody in my family really understood, being a headhunter in the tech industry. And I think about it now, I actually made a choice between pursuing tech in the 80s or going to law school. Um, what initially interested in me in law school was a high school teacher who told me that I had the skill set, and she was right. I had the skill set to be a great lawyer. I was good at arguing. Like she perceived this in part because I was the kid who would come after the test and say, I don't understand why I got that question wrong. And then I would explain to her how I got to my answer, and she'd be like, oh, you're right. I shouldn't have marked you wrong on that. And so she was increasing my grade when I had a chance to explain it. And the other part of it was I was an excellent writer and an excellent researcher. And she knew that, those were skills that lawyers needed. I didn't have lawyers in my family. I had never really had, I had one of my best friends in elementary school's dad was a lawyer, but I never talked to him about his job once. Like I didn't really know anything about it. And he wasn't a representative lawyer of what being a lawyer is like. He was an in-house lawyer at an insurance company. He came home at 5 o'clock every day. He had his weekends off. Like he never left that kind of world. And so like his life was just not real representative of lawyer life. But that's what drew me toward law school as a possibility. And I sort of had this, idea that I had to do something that was intellectually challenging and hard. And being a headhunter wasn't hard for me, in part because I was just really naturally good at it. And today I know, like, why should I fight that, right? I was really good at that. So I ultimately chose law because I got a really good LSAT score. And I had decided if I take the LSAT and I get a good score and I can go to a good law school, which at the time I went to BU, which was at the time like the 13th best law school in the country. I had wanted to stay in Boston. I didn't really look much outside of Boston. So I went, and that was, then I liked it. I liked law. There were aspects of the system of law that I really didn't like. And when I made a choice to change careers, it was because of that, not because I didn't like what I was doing in the job.
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. So you practiced law for how long?
33 years.
33 years. And you
Yeah.
transitioned into what you're doing now. So can you tell us the impetus to transition
Yeah.
later in life and what you moved to?
Okay. So the transition was a long time coming. When I want to say it was about 2012, 13, I got very burned out, as I mentioned. And in late 2014, I had this horrible pain and had to go to the hospital in the night. I thought I had appendicitis. And I was sent away with a non-diagnosis of, we can't see it on the ultrasound, so we don't really know for sure, but maybe you have gallstones. And I am the kind of person who immediately jumps online, does medical research myself, not Dr. Google, usually NIH, but I do a lot of that. And I knew that there were ways to deal with gallstones that did not involve going to a doctor who would tell me I needed surgery. And so I started to try to lose weight, did a little, I was exercising and I was eating better than I was before. And I lost about 5 pounds in a month, which I was a little frustrated with. And I had an assistant at the time who was a Beachbody coach. And I had seen her lose 40 pounds. She ran, she was way young, she was younger than me, but it was like she ran 2 full marathons 2 weeks apart.
Wow.
And I went to cheer for her at the second marathon, which was the Miami Marathon. And I'm not joking, like mile 20, she's like a deer, like she's not even sweating. And she's bopping along like she hasn't run at this point 20 miles. And so I talked to her later and I said, "What are you doing? I can't believe that. You were amazing." And she says, "Oh, it's because I'm cross training with the Beachbody programs." And so I signed up for one of the programs. And then a month later, I signed up as a coach to get the discount. And so for a year, I was literally down to my high school weight. I was a swimmer in high school. I was feeling great. I looked better than I had in years. Everything was clicking together. And, really the burnout was gone at that point too. Like I was feeling really good. And then I went to the doctor for something completely unrelated. And he said, why don't we do some blood testing? You haven't really had a checkup in a while. And he does blood testing and he discovers that the liver enzymes, which caused the doctors at the hospital to think I had gallstones, were twice as high,
Hmm.
which put them into like one of them was like 3 times normal, top of the normal range, 3 times higher. And at that point, he says, this could be serious. I think you should see a gastroenterologist, blah, blah, blah. So I go and I find out that I have an autoimmune disease. It's called PBC. It's if you look it up, it's scary, scary. It's rare. At the time, there was only one drug that treated it, and it only worked for 60% of the people.
Hmm.
And the lifespan of someone with this who didn't get treated was 10 years if they didn't get a liver transplant.
Hmm.
So, and I'm happy to say this was actually 10 years ago last year, 10 years ago this year, I guess, because it was late 2015. The drug does work for me, but I also went really, really deep into holistic medicine because when you have an autoimmune disease, a lot of times the medical treatment of it is we don't have a cure. It's the mindset about it is this is a condition that's chronic. It'll never go away. We don't have a cure for it. And in my case, thank God, there is a drug that treats one of the aspects of it, which can prevent long-term damage, which is helpful, obviously.
Hmm.
But it doesn't necessarily keep you in remission and from having more of the primary damage. So I, at that point, really dove into learning about holistic health. I had a naturopath help me with a raw foods diet for a while. I did that. Then I went big time into like kind of like the Whole 30, like an elimination diet,
Hmm.
and discovered I had a big gluten allergy. And while I was doing all this research, I decided to sign up for a 42-week health coaching program. So for like 10 hours for 42 weeks, I was doing this health coaching program because they had a lot of education about holistic health and about autoimmunity and about nutrition and all this stuff I wanted to learn about. And so I did that, never planning on using it professionally, but I did learn actual coaching skills. I was trained in that. And I learned about health, and the program I did was not just about food, it was about things outside of food that all kind of work together to create health
Mm,
and physical and mental health. And I realized after about a year of this that everything was clicking.
mm,
I was loving the work I was doing again. I was feeling better physically and emotionally than I had in years. And I looked back and I went, maybe I should do something to help other lawyers who've gotten burned out like I did. And in 2019, I created an online program it's a CLE program that's being sold by a company out of New York, and they're still selling it today.
mm,
It's still bundled with all of their programs and it gets rave reviews. And the whole point of that was it's called Lawyers Thrive and Be Alive. And it was about helping lawyers break out of burnout or not get there.
mm,
And later, I wasn't even at that point considering leaving law, but I decided to leave law and do something like that on my own and not just for lawyers. And so in 2020, I created The Art of Bending Time, which the reason it's about time is because I went back, I thought about who was I, what was my problem, what was I thinking about at the time when I was starting to become burned out and I was starting to maybe develop this autoimmune disease. And I realized that the first thing I noticed was time management issues. I was procrastinating. I would go to work and I'd be there all day and I wasn't able to get an hour's worth of work done,
mm,
really. And I wasn't sure, I thought it was a time management problem. So when that happened, I went, wow, okay. So if someone who's at risk for burnout or in the early stages of burnout, if their first symptom, and keeping in mind this is a person who got through graduate school, who did professional things that got them to a place. Obviously, it's not a person who's incapable of handling their time.
right.
But that person starts to kind of lose a grip and they become highly distractible and they become, you know, they're they're procrastinating because they don't have the interest in what they're doing or they don't have the joy in what they're doing or a desire to do it. And so it's easy to be distracted by anything else. And so that was what caused me to create that program.
Mm,
And the whole point of the program is it brings in the stuff I learned from my health coaching degree and from my personal experience and I'm part of a leadership group with Tony Robbins' organization now. And so I've had training in how he does things and I've pulled all that together into this program that helps people to really start with getting, like I said, getting those sparks back, figuring out who am I at my core? Who am I? What lights me up? What makes me happy? What drives me? And then carrying that through in a way that you can create a plan for yourself in your life. It doesn't require you to quit your job, to ditch everything. So many people find themselves, they're in their 40s, they've got a family, they've got a mortgage, they've got kids in private school or whatever. And you can't just say to that person, okay, quit your job and find yourself. What?
right.
Like, come on, let's be
Right.
real. But what you can do is you can get to that core of yourself, and then you can proactively find ways to get that in your life, in whatever part of your life, whether it's at work or at home or both. Ideally, you're finding a way to get pieces of those sparks everywhere you go. And that's going to ignite you.
I love that. I mean, how wonderful to, I mean, as we go through life, so many times we just, as you just said, we can just be going through the motions. We've
Mm-hmm.
got all of these responsibilities. I think when I was young and what I could live off of, but I'm like, yeah, because I didn't have any of these things that just get stacked on top of each other.
Right.
And this piece of personal empowerment, right? A lot of times we think I'm going to have to leave all of this behind too, right? But if we can get to burnout or those feelings before they escalate and we're drowning and we need
Right.
like a medical timeout where people just ditch their lives and just blow it
Right.
up.
Before you end up divorced, before you end up being fired
Yeah.
or having to leave your job because you've lost it and
Hmm.
you feel like you can't stay.
Yeah.
And that's the goal. The goal is to be able to reclaim yourself and to take power over what you're doing. And you can do differently in your current environment by proactively taking control of how you're living your life, of your mindset. Mindset's huge.
Hmm.
We literally are completely affected by what we let in and by how we respond to what we are letting in.
Right.
So, I had a period in my career where it was very high conflict. It was very difficult. And if I look back at that now with the lens of what I've learned, part of what I know now is that I tended to, first of all, I took it very personally. I ruminated on it,
Hmm.
and I literally would allow it to ruin my day. And then I would allow it to ruin my time at home as well. And ultimately, I'm not going to say that led to the breakdown of my marriage. I don't think it did, but I think my lack of ability to control how I handled those things and how they affected me
Hmm.
did lead to a lot of things that aren't the direction I would have wanted to go.
Yeah. I like what you said. I mean, everything that you have said, in that so many times when we are in any kind of circumstance, let's say something difficult at work and
Mm-hmm.
people are greatly misbehaving, many times we just take it as given. Well, this is the circumstance, and what am I supposed to do about it? I just have to take it. But that is absolutely not the case. And it doesn't mean you have to leave. I mean, sometimes we do need to leave, but the reframing, the conflict management, I think, is first and foremost about personal empowerment,
Right.
stopping, pausing, realizing somebody else's bad behavior is 100% about them,
Oh,
getting
for
that
sure.
distance and deciding, okay, this is what this person is doing. How am I going to respond? Am I going to think, oh, how terrible for that person to live this way and to think that's okay to interact this way, instead of letting it really infect us? Easier said than done, but
Of
as we
course.
build boundaries and self-awareness and really think about who are we, what do we want, what are we going to accept, and then when presented with bad behavior or what we understand to be bad behavior, how are we going to talk about it? I say early, often, swiftly, and justly, instead of it just kind of gets away from us. And now we're just kind of drowning because we've set these patterns have been set and
Yes.
we don't know what to do next.
And as leaders, we really need to hear all the sides and understand that our perception of someone may not be everybody's perception of
Yeah,
that person and how they behave. Because if they're a bad actor in your workplace, they're probably not doing it in front of you if you're the manager,
right,
right?
right.
And, in my experience in the situation I had, which was extremely toxic, the person would literally walk into my door. I was a lawyer, so I had a private office, and he never said anything that was bullying in front of others. He would walk into the door and close it behind him. And then he'd sit across my desk and he'd lean forward and he'd look me in the eye and he'd say what he was going to say as if it was so true. And yet, at one point, he came into my office, and I'm not joking. I had had a conversation with the founding member of the firm that I worked for and said, listen, like, I can't deal with this. This person is really, it's very difficult. Ever since I was in a position where my power level had increased, he was behaving in a way that was demeaning in front of clients, in front of associates who worked for me, who are part of our team. And when I said something to someone about it and said, this is really difficult, the person came in my office, closed the door behind him, sat at my desk, like I said, literally leaned forward, like in my face, and then said, I don't have a problem working with women. All of the secretaries hate you. What do you do with that, right?
Yeah.
And then ironically, I finally stopped trying to resolve this situation
Hmm.
because I was not getting a response from the people who had the power to do something about it. I was the most junior of the partners in this place, and it wasn't improving, it was getting worse. And I finally hit a point where I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. I've got to go.
Hmm.
And I talked to the senior partner and I left the firm. And ironically, I had a case at the time that was on appeal. And it was appeals are very difficult for lawyers in some ways that you wouldn't think about. Like, it's really hard to format an appellate brief and do it right. And there are all these picky rules about font sizes and margins, and you have to set up your tables and all this stuff. And if you've worked in law firms where you have support staff, you don't have to do that stuff. You've never had to do it. You write the content, and a secretary picks up that part and they fix it for you, right? They make the tables and all that nice stuff. So I had never had to learn to do that. And I was frankly really kind of worried because I had an appeal brief due. And I knew like I've got to do this, but I don't know how to do it. I got a call out of the blue. I didn't even ask for this help from that person's assistant to say, hey, I know you've got that brief due. Do you know how to do it? Do you want me to help you? And then she proceeded to help me on the side.
Hmm. That's lovely.
And because all the secretaries hated me,
Yeah.
right? Like hated me so much, she literally came and I said, and I can't remember if I paid her for it or not, but she didn't ask me to pay her for it. And I think I did, but it was like it was on contingency and I paid her after because I didn't have the money.
Hmm.
And, but she was volunteering her time to do that for me, to help me out.
Yeah. That's the one of the problems when we first I want to say most of the people that show up for work are professional. Most of the people just want to do a good job, but we do find in just about every place these people for whatever reason in their time in their life they are misbehaving and they're not treating
Mm-hmm.
people well or they're picking certain people to pick on.
Yeah.
And the question is, then what do we do about it? But we have this sort of gaslighting because I can even hear it this many years later in your voice, like what this person said wasn't true. And you knew at the time it wasn't true. But when somebody says that to you, and it's this sort of gaslighting, like, am I reading these things wrong? And
Yeah.
then you get this later confirmation that, no, I'm not. I'm not reading it wrong. But those kinds of people with the confidence, they just have this ability for us to question ourselves. And so it's so important to have mentors who can right size what's going on, tell us the truth, and then help us make a plan for the next thing.
Oh, for sure. And at the same time as they're gaslighting the person that they're victimizing,
Hmm.
really,
Yeah.
they are also gaslighting the person who could have a position where they could help,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So that's often what happens, and it's toxic. It's so toxic to an organization. And the hard part is how do you handle that part, that thing, that situation, that person, but also that situation? Because as a group, as an organization, it's a cancer on the organization
Yeah.
to have one person who behaves that way.
Yeah.
And it can go on for years because people are afraid
Yeah.
or because people are gaslit themselves and they don't see what's going on fully. And then it's they're losing people because of it, and they're losing business potentially because of it, and they don't even know. So, I mean, I am such a strong believer in doing everything we can to create true human relationships among and inside of organizations. And part of what I tell people in my program is I'm a very strong proponent of the concept that work-life balance is a myth
Mm,
because of the fact that when we have full work-life balance, I see these people who don't have a real relationship with the people at work because they think it's better not to interrupt or not to bother someone or, not to invite them to the thing at their house because that would mean that they're crossing those lines or not to have a social connection outside of work with someone. But that means that your whole relationship is task oriented. And if you just have a task oriented relationship with someone, you're missing out on like 80% of who they are.
mm,
Way more than that, really, right? But if you have that full relationship and you're like, it's not task oriented, it's human, you know who they are as a person. First of all, when that person comes to you and says, this is happening and this other piece of our team, you're more likely to actually believe them and to have find a way to work it out. And
mhm,
frankly, if all the members of your team have this relationship, maybe that bad egg isn't even going to behave that way, or they're going to behave that way less because they realize, listen, this person isn't out for my job.
mm,
What I saw was a situation of someone who had to feel like he was the most knowledgeable, the best, the most important. And when he was threatened by someone else's skill was when things got weird.
mm,
And that was something that, I saw repeated. It didn't just happen to me, and good people left because of it.
mhm,
So, when that's it, I don't know. I had a mentor when I worked in Washington, D.C., who said something I thought was really brilliant. And what he said was he was the founder of a firm in DC and it had been together for a long time. They were very successful. And his thing he said to me was, I don't ever want to hire somebody who isn't smarter than me. I want to be the dumbest guy in the room. And, what a great perspective because if you build a team of brilliant people and you're working together as a team, you're unbeatable.
yeah,
And if you're the guy on top and you have a big ego and you have to keep everyone around you small, you're never going to have a great team. You're
right.
going to have a team that's no better than you are and probably less capable than you are.
Yeah, definitely less engaged and less committed. You're not going to get that creativity, the innovation, all the interconnectedness that you would get because you're standing in the way.
And the
So what
commitment,
yeah, so
like
when you
commitment's huge.
yes, absolutely. When you look back at the scenario that happened and given what you know now about and what you practice and what you encourage other people to do, is there anything that you would have done differently, like when you started noticing this behavior, or would you have left sooner, or is there anything that, if anything, you would have done differently?
I think today I would see it, first of all.
Mm,
And I didn't recognize what I was dealing with until it was a pattern.
mm,
Um, it started earlier than, and it started, probably the first sign that was, and this was honestly before this person even came into our law practice. He had agreed to come. He came in as a 50% partner to the person who founded the firm. And he was coming with staff and they were creating space to expand the firm. And so his office was being built out. And the first day he came in, he walked into my office, he introduces himself, and then he looks up at the ceiling and he counted the tiles. And I found out later he went straight from my office to the firm administrator's office and said, her office is bigger than mine. I want you to move her so that I have the bigger office. And they refused to move him, but they moved the wall of the office they were building out for him to make his office bigger than mine, which resulted in a paralegal office which was barely wide enough for a small computer desk facing a window.
oh my word. Wow.
Like literally the width of like 6 feet wide, maybe. So that it was like a closet for a
Yeah.
paralegal because his ego couldn't accept that the office that was already built out that I was in was going to be, I mean, slightly bigger than the office that was designed for him to go into.
Mm. Yeah.
And, at that moment, I mean, honestly, I don't know how I would have handled it differently. At that moment, I laughed about it. I thought it was kind of funny and ridiculous. I didn't really see it as a sign of what it really was.
Hmm.
And, I might have been a little more serious about the conversation with the partners, the founding partner. I wasn't a partner yet at that point.
Hmm.
I had been promised partnership and I was given this nice office with expectation of that within about 6 months.
Mm.
And so the partner decision was really already made, but now this person was coming in as part of that partnership.
Mm.
And I did not really engage about it at all because I didn't feel like I had any role or power in the decision. I think I would handle that differently today.
It is interesting, right? This idea of red flags, and we want to see them when they're being waved. But then you also said pattern, right? So we just assume, because we assume, which is most of our experience, that people aren't, mischievous or, that most people are just good actors. They're coming to
Right,
work. We have different personalities and we're going to have, different kinds of normal disagreements. But, so we so much wish we could see the red flag or, as you said, notice it to at least have a conversation like, hey, what's going on? Is this indicative of something else? Versus then when it
right.
becomes a set pattern, now, you know, somebody is entrenched in a way of behavior and it's normalized to them and it's in the air now.
And it's been accepted
Yeah.
over and over,
Hmm.
right? It's been accepted. The behavior is just, oh, okay, sure, we'll move a wall for you.
Hmm.
Oh, okay, sure, we'll accept this person or we'll push out this person because we think, you don't like them. And, we'll accept your story of what happened so that the person, the assistant who worked for me when I left stayed and was fired because of a situation where his travel arrangements, which she had recommended be done differently, didn't work out for him. And, really, you're going to fire a qualified assistant for a mistake on travel arrangements? That kind of behavior was pervasive.
Hmm.
And, it wasn't right and it was accepted. And like I said, I mean, I finally couldn't take it anymore and walked away and then watched as I saw other people leaving, some of whom were pushed out and some of whom, like me, were just finally like, I'm not going to tolerate this. So
Hmm.
I'm leaving.
Yeah. There's so much that we can do when we have a bad system or a bad environment to start just what we are going to accept and how we're going to show up and the kind of relationships we're going to build and the kinds of barriers we're going to put up. But if the system is such that it it won't at this time be fixed or the people who are leading refuse to see or act, then if you have the ability and you have tried and this is negatively impacting your life, then of course the better part of wisdom is to find something else.
Right. And there's, I probably stayed way longer than I should have. I kept hoping, I kept thinking that this person would finally leave, and he didn't. And then he did after I left, right? But at some point I was like, he's gonna have to leave. He's gonna leave. He's gonna leave. Because he was constantly also bad mouthing the firm and the founding partner of the firm and trying to drive a wedge between me and him.
Mm.
And he was doing that, I'm sure, with other people too, right?
Yeah.
So I figured at some point, again, taking somebody for their word, that at some point he would leave.
Hmm.
And it didn't happen, didn't happen, didn't happen. I'm like, please just let him leave. And I finally I couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
But the problem was I had allowed it to break me in a
Mm.
way. And it took me a while to recover from that. I now see that experience as, thank God I walked away. I never in a million years would have been a solo practitioner attorney if I hadn't done that. I ended up staying on my own for the rest of my career. I had incredible level of control over my time that most lawyers don't have. I got to do things outside of work that most lawyers wouldn't be able to do because I controlled my time and I controlled my intake and I didn't choose to overbook myself to the point that all I could do was work. And, like my entire life is a different life because of it, and it's a better life because of it. But I wouldn't, at the time, I mean, who walks away from a well-paid, really great job to make no money for who knows how long?
Yeah.
And, that was not an act of intelligence or strategy. It was an act of like, I have to save myself desperation. But in the end, it worked out well.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that it did. And so you pivoted from this really difficult situation to a life of joy and choosing joy and helping other people reclaim their sense of self
Yeah.
and that spark of creativity. So tell us just a little bit more about what exactly the art of bending time is.
So the concept of the art of bending time is that we all have the same amount of time, obviously. And I say in things on the online, and I'm sure you've seen it, I promise people I can get them an additional 10 hours of productive time a week to do what they love without having to quit their job. Now, you might have set hours at work and you might not be able to have more time at work. But if that's the case, you will get more done in that time at work, which will probably improve your situation there. And you'll be able to better use the time outside of work. And you'll learn skills. I have a little kind of a character that I use, and it's sort of a central theme to what I'm doing. The central themes are pretty straightforward. One is that finding your spark, figuring out who you are and what lights you up. And one is a character I call Time Suck Ninja. My goal is to make everybody a Time Suck Ninja. And when you're a Time Suck Ninja, you learn to have power over both what I call your internal time sucks, things like self-soothing. You pick up your phone and scroll, and the next thing is it's an hour later and you haven't done the thing that you were supposed to do
Mhm.
because you're stressed about it, you're uncomfortable with it, maybe you don't like it, whatever it is, you're easily distracted into doing something that's a complete waste of your time and gets you nowhere, right? You're doing that instead of doing the productive work because you're
Yes.
uncomfortable for some reason, or
Mhm.
you don't feel well, or you're distractible because of your mental state is in a place where you're not focused.
Mhm.
So getting not just clarity on what you want and who you are, but being able to stay focused. And to me, a big part of that is energy. A big part of that is health.
Mhm.
A big part of that is eating healthy foods that don't make you tired in the afternoon and don't make you feel crappy.
Mhm.
It's getting enough sleep and getting quality sleep. It's being hydrated, especially big in places like where I live in South Florida and we're, living in the heat all the time right now, and it's brutal.
Mhm.
And yet, there are people, and I was one of them back in the day before I found my autoimmunity and all the rest. Um, I lived on coffee and Diet Coke for years. Like, I don't think there was a liquid that went in my body that wasn't either coffee or chemicals or alcohol,
Mhm.
right? It was a mix of all those things, but like drinking actual water didn't even occur to me. I didn't drink water. Who drinks water? I drank Diet Coke and coffee. And it's terrible for you. And it destroys your microbiome. It does all these things that ultimately can lead you into a very bad place physically and mentally. it you become distractible. I mean, early stage of most autoimmunity and microbiome issues, people have memory issues. They have focus problems. You fix that stuff, there's a lot of evidence that ADHD is effectively treated by diet and exercise.
Mhm.
And, people can take drugs for it and that helps, but you might not need to. And you might be able to fix those problems. And a lot of those problems come on as an adult because when we're younger and we're kind of following somebody else's routine, we're not doing the unhealthy stuff as much. So that's one piece of it. And then external time sucks, which are things like the boss who walks into your office at 12 o'clock on Friday and says, I need this by Monday morning. Or some of them you can't fully control. Like as a litigation attorney, I was regularly driven in part by court calendars and by motions filed by the other side, discovery sent by the other side that had sort of an automated timeline tied to them.
Mhm.
And it wasn't something I could plan months in advance. It's part of the reason I didn't change. I actually didn't change careers or even start working in this new career until my last case was over. And the reason for that was because I knew that if I booked a speaking engagement, for instance, or a corporate workshop, they would pay me part of it months in advance. They'd block the time. They'd have marketed the event. They'd have planned for people to come, whatever it was. And I could have a court reach out to me and say, there's a hearing on this and it's going to be this date.
Mhm.
Or your trial date is X. And I've booked things 6 months out and it's in that window.
Mhm.
And then, I couldn't go to a judge and say, sorry, Your Honor, I've got this other side business I'm doing, and I can't show up now because I've got this corporate gig,
Right.
right? Like it's just not cool. It's really
Right.
inappropriate and it would have ruined my my reputation. So I didn't do it then. But those kinds of what I call external time sucks, some of them are going to be part of your job and you can't help it. But some of them are going to be things that you do have control over. There's also environmental issues. You might have a lot of noise. You might have a desk. At one point, I had a desk across from the kitchen. Like in a law firm that had a culture of people leaving their doors open, and it was kind of like frowned upon not to have your door open. And so I put my computer on the credenza behind me so that if I was working and I was focused, my back was to the door.
Mm.
And people could see that I was working and I was into something and they'd leave me alone. But
Mhm.
when my face was turned toward the door,
Right.
everybody felt like they could just come in and say hi. And
Right.
that's nice, but like it was a real distraction.
Yeah. Well, Michelle, this time has gotten away from us, but I want to end with this question. Um, when you look to the future of work, what do you think needs to happen so that not only will all workers be treated with dignity and respect, but that people will be encouraged to thrive and flourish?
For this to happen, and it's really important, and in my opinion, it may not mean eliminating remote work, but it means having more opportunities to be connected. We need to get out of the boxed work-life balance. I'm on my screen all day and then I'm at home, or I'm in my office with my door closed or my head in my earphones or whatever it is. We need to have personal human connections with other people. And that's for a lot of reasons. It makes a team stronger. It makes people feel more connected. It also, frankly, I think in the age of AI, it's going to be really important if you want to have a job down the road. And if you want to be part of a cohesive team where the people recognize the strengths and the human strengths, not the so and so can fill out a spreadsheet, because somebody who can fill out a spreadsheet is replaceable. That person is going to be, you know, if they're if they're good at prompting AI, they're going to still be spreading out spreadsheets with their skills of prompting AI properly and making it work and getting it right. Because I don't know about you, I've tried to do spreadsheets on AI and I've gotten ridiculous results. So you've got to know how to do that, right? But you also have to have human contact, human connection, know each other way better than just the Sally's good at doing spreadsheets. Now we know that Sally has 2 kids and a dog, and that her favorite thing to do on the weekend is play pickleball. And she's, whatever it is, right? You need to know each other on a human level. And that helps you to bring out the best in the people in your team. And it helps the people in the team contribute in the ways that they can. Maybe Sally's a brilliant artist and you just see her as the spreadsheet girl, and you're paying for simple art that she could be doing. And you
Yeah.
never knew it because it's something she does for fun on the side.
Right.
You know,
And that
there's
speaks
things
to
like
her.
that.
It speaks to her spark and joy.
Exactly. And that to a degree is, like I said, the art of bending time is really to optimize how we use our time, how we connect with people, how those connections grow us and grow our potential and grow the reach of what we have to offer, and as a team, as what our team has to offer or what our company has to offer. And it starts with that spark of joy, and then it expands into that team, and then it expands into that community.
Yeah. Gosh, I love that so much. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for being on Conflict Managed. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Mary.
Take care. Thank you, Michelle, for being on Conflict Managed. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I love what you're up to, helping people find the time that is already there. So, better use of their time and this healthy lifestyle where you find your spark and your joy. And that is just wonderful. Conflict Managed is produced by Third Party Workplace Conflict Restoration Services and hosted by me, Mary Brown. You can find us online at 3pconflictrestoration.com. Come back. We have new episodes every Tuesday, and you can watch this conversation with Michelle and I on YouTube. And I did notice in our conversation, she has an animal that walks back and forth a couple of times in the background. So come and watch and see if you can spot that sweet little animal. Please like and subscribe wherever you are watching this. It really helps us. Our music is courtesy of Dove Pilot. And remember, conflict is normal and expected. Let's deal with it. Until next time, take care.